Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to East Central Missouri and the world, and welcome to the James Strong Show podcast number 175. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for making us a part of your day. I appreciate it. This podcast was recorded on the evening of Thursday, June the 11th, from the swimming pool deck of my house. We decided to do an outdoors podcast. I wanted to have a guest in studio, but with the social distancing, with the pandemic, I didn't feel it was safe to have someone in studio. I didn't want to expose them to me or me to them. But I thought, well, how can we do this? I didn't want to do it via the telephone, okay? So lots of things I've read, lots of things I've heard have told me that, you know what, maybe if you're outside, not in close quarters, you're going to be safe. Maybe that's based on the Lake of the Ozarks partiers, I don't know, but about how virtually none of them came down with the coronavirus. Maybe the protesters, none that I have heard of, have come down with huge spikes in with the coronavirus. So we thought, you know what, let's just go ahead and have an outdoor podcast. So my guest, I'm not going to say in studio, we'll see. My guest at Pool Deck is, he's a police officer. He has his podcast. It's the Rusty Dell podcast. His name is Rusty Dell. Rusty, welcome to the James Strong Show.
Well, thank you so much.
No problem getting here, I guess.
No, it was a great drive.
Wonderful, wonderful. And thank you for coming. You feel safe?
I do. Yeah.
Okay, very good. I wanted to go ahead and do this. I've never done an outdoor podcast before. I've done outdoor remotes when I was in radio. But that's a little bit different because you're not taping and recording later. It's a live broadcast. There's a whole lot more moving parts to something like that. But I think we'll be good on this. Rusty, I wanted to have you on the show because you're a policeman. First of all, I have no idea why anyone would ever want that job. It's dangerous. It's full of pressure, and the pay's not that great. So first of all, thanks a whole lot for doing the job and keeping us safe.
Yeah, I sometimes think about what I would have done if I hadn't gotten into law enforcement. And, I'm 37. I've only been doing this for 5 years, so I wasn't always a police officer. But, I feel like I don't know what else I would do with myself, so I'm just going to keep doing it. But yeah, it's a stressful job. It's commonly known that police officers have trouble with PTSD, sleeping disorders. They die young. They usually die within a year from when they retire.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I think it's important to have hobbies and have things. You can't just worry about the job all the time. And I think that's part of the reason I started the podcast, really.
To kind of get your mind off it and maybe do other things.
There's got to be something else to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's start with the coronavirus, and then we'll go into the George Floyd killing, both of which I'm going to make an assumption that it's made your job difficult, both of them. One more set of rules to follow, one more thing that happened with the George Floyd killing. One cop killed one guy, and you hear about police forces being disbanded, calling for police forces to be defunded. Now, I'll give my opinion. You can give your opinion if you like. But the George Floyd killing, I think, was a tragedy. It was horrible. An innocent man died needlessly. But on the bright side, if there is a bright side to it, the officer who killed him was within 4 days charged. Well, first of all, he was fired. Then he was charged, and he will go to trial for this murder, second-degree murder, okay? To me, the system worked, and that doesn't excuse what he did, but to me, that says, look, as a society, we've recognized that this is something that was wrong. So there's a silver lining to this cloud. Have I got this wrong? What do you think?
No, I think that's accurate. I think so I was visiting family. I was out of town for my mother's birthday when this all happened. And we're sitting in my grandmother's living room, and this news story comes on, and I was like, what channel is this? This can't be real life, And so I immediately just the mood in the room was just deflated because it's like, it's about to get bad nationwide.
Right.
And I wasn't there, and like a lot of videos you see, not just police videos, but anything that's online or on the news, they might have been recording for, so it was 8 minutes and 40 seconds roughly. Mm-hmm. They might have been recording 8 minutes even before that. And, you never seem to get the whole story, but I don't think there's anything that could have happened before that would make it okay. It doesn't really matter what happened before that. It's just a horrible way to treat someone. And, Minneapolis, I mean, I've never been there, but it's a big city, right? And I would think they have a lot of officers and probably a big budget. And I would think that someone like him would have a lot of training. So either they didn't have good training, or he did, but he just didn't follow it. I don't know what was going through his mind in that moment.
Sure. Yeah. So here's a police officer who is what's the word I want to use? You're agreeing with most people that this was something that was wrong. So why are we down on the police officers? That's my question.
And I don't talk very much about law enforcement, like on social media, for example. Some of my friends do, but I know that anything I post is going to start an argument, so you don't hear me saying too much. I mean, I have my own opinions. I don't always voice them. But really, I feel like most people that are in law enforcement would tell you there's been a war on cops since when Obama was in office, and I don't think we feel it as much. I mean, I'm in kind of a rural area, but I think nationwide that's been something that's been going on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you're always going to have bad politicians, bad policemen, bad doctors, bad lawyers, bad fill in the blank. Mm-hmm. I personally find it encouraging that as a society we're saying, look, we're not going to put up with this anymore.
No.
And the thing with a police officer is your life is on the line, and you also hold the life of others in your hand during times too. It has to make it terribly difficult.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people, including some of my personal friends, who would say, well, yeah, but you signed up for that. Kind of like
which is true.
Kind of like a code. It's like code for don't be complaining too much because you're the one that wanted to do it, and that's true. That's true. But training and then in a moment of stress, trying to remember what you were trained to do. And again, I don't know why you would kneel on someone in that fashion for that long. If I remember right, he was handcuffed already, so I don't know how much of a threat this guy could have been.
Yeah.
I listened to Bill Burr the other day. And he says, I don't know what this guy was afraid of. Did he think the guy was going to do the worm or something? Like, what was he going to, the dance move, I guess? And he was being funny, but it was true, too. Like, what was he going to do? He's already down for the count,
Exactly. And while Floyd was a big man, there were 4 cops. Yeah. In my opinion, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, if there's 4 policemen who are apprehending one suspect, if those 4 guys can't take down one guy, they probably need to be meter maids or something.
Yeah, and when we talk about like neck restraints, when I was in the academy, they taught us what they called a lateral vascular neck restraint, which most people would just call it a sleeper hold.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a right and a wrong way to do it, and even when you know the right way to do it, a lot of agencies do not allow it. So if you were to do that, you'd be written up and probably fired.
Right.
If you work for someone, a certain law enforcement agency who says we don't do that here, but there's a right way to do it, and it involves basically sort of restricting momentarily the blood flow, but you're pinching the sides of the neck, not the front or the back, not the trachea, obviously. Mm-hmm. So it's as safe as can be if you were just exhausted, could not fight anymore, and had to make the situation, get it over with. But even then, even like I say, when you know the right way to do it, it doesn't mean you're allowed to do it where you work.
Sure, and in a life or death situation where you feel your life is threatened, that's different. But again, this policeman's life was not threatened then.
Right.
Have you had any animosity pointed at you as a police officer in light of this whole George Floyd killing?
No, and I think because of where I live and where I work, I don't know that it will be that way. Hopefully, I mean, people out in my area, they really love their cops. We had a Proposition P on the tax or on the ballots. Was it last year? And it passed. It wasn't 100% yes vote, but it passed. So I feel like feel like we're kind of shown in a good light, I guess. Mm-hmm. So I don't suspect I will see any of that, and I hope not. But people are upset, so.
Sure. And again, so it really hasn't affected your job too terribly bad? You haven't seen any repercussions?
Not really. We had some protests in our area. There's been like 4 or 5 of them now, but everything was peaceful. They cleaned up their trash. They left everything the way they found it. There was concern that it would go downhill, mm-hmm. and that maybe people that weren't working would be called in to help with, I guess, some kind of crowd control.
Just in case.
And that made me nervous because, well, for one, I want to enjoy my time off. I really need my time off to rest up and relax and get ready to go back in a couple of days and do it all over again. And
sure.
And so I was kind of selfish. I said, well, I know people have a right to express their feelings, but do they have to do it every day this week? Good Lord, I want to just be at home sometimes,
And those of you listening at home will think, or maybe thinking, well, what is with this guy? Come on. Everybody appreciates a day off. And that's the one thing that I've always understood, or tried my best to understood, I should say, when it comes to a doctor or a nurse or a police officer or a soldier. This is your job, mm-hmm. and you give it your all when you're there, but when it's quitting time, it's yabba dabba doo. It's the weekend for you, too. You want to barbecue and kick back with the family and do things with friends and go fishing and everything else. Your life is not about the job. It's not like a television show. Is that a good way to put it?
Well, I feel like I've always thought that whatever you do for a living is not necessarily your life, but it finances your life, because maybe you do have hobbies and you like to travel, and so when I worked at a factory back in the day, or when I was a roofer, I really felt strongly about that. Law enforcement is a little different. I think it's more of a calling. It's not something you just do for money, because you'd be a fool because there's not that much money in it.
Sure.
So yeah, not wanting to take away that kind of the romanticism of it all, of protecting the people, and so it still is a job, and it is kind of something you do to finance the rest of your life. And if you can't ever have the rest of your life, but like I said, we didn't get called in on our days off, and everyone was peaceful, and I was happy to see that.
Well, and I think the media has misrepresented a lot of what's gone on too. They say the rioting protesters. Well, I don't know. First of all, there's the protesters. In my opinion, there's the protesters and then the anarchists. The majority of the peaceful protesters, in fact, none of the peaceful protesters were looting buildings or burning targets. Okay, I think there are 2 different groups, and is that the way word on the blue street? Is that how it is too?
Well, yeah, they might show up in the same location, and that's unfortunate, trying to figure out who is who. And luckily, like I said, where we are, we haven't had to deal with that. But I imagine in a more diverse area or in a bigger city, it's probably really hard to sit there with your riot shield and your face shield on and try to figure out who wants to hurt you and who doesn't, right? And
mm-hmm.
by the time you figure it out, it's too late, and they're throwing things at you, and just can't imagine being in that situation. So, and what makes me angry too is the looting begins, and I'm seeing this footage on the news or even on like Facebook videos, and I'm thinking, what does this have to do with this poor man dying? I feel like you just wanted to do that all along. You've always wanted to do those things, and now you think somehow you're justified or you'll get away with it.
Here's your green light.
And there's no correlation between the two things. So you need a new plasma TV? What's it got to do with anything?
Wow.
The one guy, they made fun of him. It was I think it was a young white man, and not that the color should matter, but that's what they kept calling him. And he was stealing Legos. He was out of I forget what the store was. Was it a Target or something? But anyway, people are running out with really expensive items like TVs and such. And I got to thinking about it, and I remember when my kids were a little bit younger, and I thought, on second thought, Legos are pretty expensive these days. I see where he's coming from. Yeah. But yeah, you just always wanted to do that. This is an excuse. It's not helping anybody.
Or I'll make an assumption off of that one there, and I'll paint everybody with one broad brush. That was just some millennial who still lived in his mom and dad's basement, and he played with Legos, so he just his play toy.
That was the last one he needed to complete his collection.
There you go. Now he's got the full Star Wars collection or something.
Yeah.
Or the full Harry Potter Lego collection.
Maybe he didn't even open it. Maybe he's just going to wait until the value goes up more and just sell it. Yeah.
Who knows? Who knows? Well, thank goodness you didn't have those problems where you were. You had peaceful protesting.